Hello, hello. How you doing?
I'm I'm great. I'm great.
We're great. Are we doing intros anymore? We
No,
did,
no
but we
intros.
didn't.
I forgot that we're not doing intros.
Yeah, we'll just throw a little thing at the beginning. It's fine.
Yeah. Yep.
Who cares?
My histamines were overreactive. I
Yeah.
forgot.
Well, the weather's bananas. Who knows what's flying through the air? I mean, chemtrails, and we were at a restaurant. Well, not that we're trying to lighten the mood or whatever, but at a restaurant last night, they're like, "Did you hear about the water around here?" I said, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Well, the creek or the river or whatever overflowed a couple days ago, and now all the water tastes like a swimming pool because of like chemicals that they had to use to treat the drinking water after this river overflowed." And I'm
Have
like,
dinner in
"Oh,
Kentucky? What are you
Mar like 15 minutes from my house, Kentucky, Missouri." So yeah,
did last night in the throes of just nodding all night long? I did watch that documentary that you recommended about the cruise ship.
yeah, yeah. Poop,
Oh,
poop cruise. Can you imagine? It's like a worst nightmare.
yeah. Yeah. The scene that really shook me, like the sewage issue was one thing, but when the food shortage started and like when I saw that line for people to get food, like my palms started to sweat because we're animals at that point.
Exactly.
It doesn't take that much.
Yeah, and it's not that you or I couldn't eat for a few days. We'd be fine. I'd be fine. I'd have a
Hmm.
pretty stable blood sugar, and I actually do really well, like with no food, like energy wise. It's not that, it's how feral groups of people get. Because even if they individually would be okay without eating, it's that animal brain, that reptile brain kicks in of like scarcity and resources, and everybody just, every man for themselves.
That is the scariest thought. Like even just watching it, my mind initially went to, okay, in that moment, I would know, okay, 3 days of not eating would be uncomfortable. 7 days would maybe start to get a little bit dangerous. But it's weird that your mind would immediately start to go to like day 4, day 5, and it's like, okay, I need to start. I have no idea how long this is going to be. I need to start preparing for this. It's Game of Thrones immediately. Winter is
Yeah.
coming.
So then everybody takes more than they need for right now, which means some people get nothing, and then fighting begins and chaos. And yeah.
It's like that the Stanford prison experiments. Does not take much for that to turn right on, baby.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was an old episode of Doomsday Preppers, which I loved that show when it was out. The guy said, "We're only ever 3 meals from anarchy."
Yes,
And I was like, bleak, but probably true.
it is. It definitely is. I love the Russian lady that worked there. Her interviews were awesome. First off,
Yeah.
she's like, working on a cruise is amazing. I never thought I would be out of the Soviet Union, and there's so much sex that's happening. And then when the food shortage started, she's like, "Welcome to Soviet Union, bitches." And I'm
Yeah.
like, this lady is awesome.
Yeah. She's like, "This is nothing new. This is all every day in Soviet Union. It's about time you see what this is like." Like, oh wow.
She's like, "Where is your Reagan now?"
This is my
Okay,
comfort zone.
let's talk about startup. So a big topic of conversation in startup world is founder-led sales. So the essential thesis here is that there's in the early stages of startup and finding product market fit, messaging and sales like must be done by the founders. Like that, these are the people that must learn how to do it. And oftentimes that gets a little squirrely in the venture capital world because you have these companies, these startups that maybe have never gone out to try to sell or build a sales system. Oftentimes founders are generally more technical than they are salespeople. And so, there's some people that would kind of say that big early checks are oftentimes more detrimental to startups because there's never a forcing function for founder-led sales.
Mhm.
As somebody yourself who has worked in a lot of varied sales roles, talk to me about your experience on both sides of that. Talk to me about the difference being on both sides of it, selling inside of another organization, and then now having experienced this founder-led sales phenomenon.
I've actually been thinking about this a lot lately, and I'm new to the world of software, right? And Pro Mode is a very different type of software. It's it's the future of software, which is agentic AI, it's headcount replacement. So it's like this like hybrid solution between where I come from and where you come from, really, like software and services. So I was used to selling the same deliverables that ProMode is producing, but obviously done by humans who work at a marketing agency. And so I was selling hours and packages of hours and scoping out, work that way. I have so many thoughts on this. Whoever is selling, especially in a small company, I worked at a fairly small agency, small in the grand scheme of companies for sure. I was the only salesperson. Right. So it's not like we had a huge sales team with lots of codified systems and processes and SOPs. In those organizations, they're far more stable. The salespeople can be swapped out, and they do swap out often. They churn, and you can hire somebody else to do that same position. Um, and the company is steering that ship. But when you've got one salesperson at a smaller company, even if you've got one or two or even three salespeople, those salespeople really are the rudder of the company because they are selling to the people they can feasibly sell to, right? The types of companies, the types of people, their network, like whatever their prospecting system is, like their personality is drawing certain types of people, their sales process is closing certain types of people. So that agency ends up servicing the accounts that salesperson is selling. And so before you know it, if you've got a salesperson like I was who's selling a lot of business, you might have one idea of the direction of your agency, but if the salesperson keeps selling something different because it's what they see needs to be done or a direction that they're pulled to for whatever reason, the whole shape of your agency can change like pretty radically. So I think it's for that reason, I think it's so important that founder led sales do happen so that you can have some control of like client quality control, like who are we going after and who do we want to do business with. Um so there's that thought in my head. However, in the last month, I had a light bulb click on because this was my first time selling something that I was part of creating. Right. So I very much have an emotional connection with this thing called Pro Mode. And I believe in it more than I've believed in anything I've ever sold before. Right. I know what that client will experience when using Pro Mode. Whereas at an agency, I'm not so sure. Like who am I passing them off to? Do I have confidence in the team? Sometimes yes, sometimes not so yes. Right. My level of enthusiasm is much higher with Pro Mode, and, I'm like, all my chips are on Pro Mode in every possible way you can imagine, right? And same with you. And so there's a lot of passion behind my expression of Pro Mode. What I have found in the last month is I have to and this might be helpful for other founders, I don't know. I have to take off my founder hat and put on my salesperson hat when doing sales activities,
Mhm, mhm.
when running a sales system, in my prospecting efforts, in my sales conversations. Like, can I click back to founder mode occasionally? Sure, I'm sure that will happen, but I have to kind of get back to those sales roots and remove the emotion from it and stick to the process that I know. Because if you don't, I think that founders can get meetings easier than salespeople, just like business owners can get meetings easier than salespeople. However, I don't know. I think ghosting happens a lot when you're a founder because they don't want to tell you no,
Uh-huh.
because they know how excited you are about it. They know it's them calling your baby ugly if they don't buy it.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
Right. And yeah, I'm just kind of betting on my enthusiasm closing the deal rather than being a salesperson in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, when are we going to talk again? Let's put it on the calendar, doing like sales behavior. So I think that's where the founder-led sales can become very valuable is if you have a founder who has the ability to click into a sales mode. Like I am here to run a system, run a process, and collect data from this experience. Like, I think if you can do that while being a founder, that's where magic happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the point of founder-led sales, right? It is to eventually, I was recently talking with somebody about like, when are you gonna take an investment at Pro Mode? And I was like, the minute we know exactly where to put jet fuel, it's like the day that we can confidently say, this is the fire that this gasoline is dumped on. And that's the benefit is like the thing that you're talking about is to have almost like in a really detached way run a system that is so consistent and so dialed in that metrics are on the other side of running that system.
Yeah, I feel like I was going to say something else on that. Oh, yeah. So you don't want your enthusiasm to close the deal. Like in the short term, you do. If you're the founder, you want to approach your network and the network of your network and their network and everybody's network. You want to approach those people with this exciting message of, I've solved this huge problem. Isn't this amazing? Let's go. We're going to save you money, save you time, do far more marketing than you've ever done before. This is going to be kick ass. You actually don't want that to close a deal. You want that to pique interest because long term, I can be the, figurehead of the company and have the conversations publicly and be the ambassador, right? But ultimately, I want the message of the product, what it can solve for you as a company, and to flow through a system. I want that to close the deal because I can't hire another salesperson to be me.
Hmm. Hmm.
I can't hire 7 salespeople to, inject the enthusiasm into this that I have because they won't have it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's going to be a loss there, and like the best you could hope for is the first person you hire is like 80% as fired up as you. That's like best case scenario.
But honestly, I wouldn't hire them
Right.
because the person who I know it, I would be tempted to. I would be tempted to because I would see myself in them and everybody likes people who are like them, right? But I wouldn't because I would say, I already have one of me. I need a hyper disciplined sales robot who can run a system. And I've worked with some of those people. I know that type, and they are not the razzle dazzle salespeople,
Yeah, yeah.
but that's who I would want to plug in at that point where we're like, this is exactly who we're for. This is the message. Run. We have that system. We've proved the concept in our own laboratory. Now we can hire salespeople, investors, ads, everything.
You said an interesting thing at the beginning when you were answering that question about founder-led sales, that when you're selling hours in an agency, you said that the salesperson is like a rudder of that entire business, it's interesting because that will actually kill a startup. It is like one of the most cautionary tales is this like changing your feature set, changing your product thesis as you see like monetary momentum, and then you just end
Right.
up with an unusable application, and then you juxtapose that with actual product market fit. More often than not, when you actually find that product market fit where like demand generation is built into the system or built into the product, the feature set that actually is establishing that product market fit is oftentimes a really slim one, right? Like,
Mm.
for example, like let's just use a tool that everybody knows, Canva, right? the functions that can't like you can do so much in Canva. I mean, you've got shapes, you can draw, you can apply
You
gradients.
got your
Yeah.
shapes, you got your colors, you got your fonts, you got your pictures with the ones your mother likes. Yes, I'm
No,
sorry.
you're good.
It's
That's great.
Friday. No, it's not Friday. It's not even Friday. It's okay. Day before
You
4th of
got
July.
independent.
But yes,
Yeah, you
Canva.
got America on the brain, baby. But if you think about like 90, I'm just guessing here, but I would venture to say that I've looked over a lot of people's shoulders using Canva. 90% of them are the feature set that they're using is like Canva's brand kit and their templates. Use a template, put it over an image, you've got your uploads, and you modify that template using your brand kit. As far as a feature set in a software, that is such, you've got 90% of users using this super slim feature set, and then maybe you have slight deviations outside of that, but that really ends up being what product market fit is. So that's why, as founders will like pivot towards sales instead of looking for sales where there is like a logical path to scalability.
Well, this is why the founder led is so key because I am pretty pretty freaking disciplined when it comes to not selling promo to the wrong people. We've had some bad fit clients already, right? And they wash out, but I could have sold a lot more bad fit
Yeah,
clients
exactly.
between launch and now. Sometimes that's super obvious and I'm just really transparent like, "Hey, I don't even know how many people I've had ask me if we could do like if we have something less than $2,500 a month, do you have a solution for small businesses? And I say I don't have a solution for anyone who cannot afford $2,500 a month. In fact, I don't want to sell promo to a company who wants to spend $2,500 a month on marketing. I want to sell promo to a company who is today spending $10,000 a month on marketing and then shifts to 2,500. I want to be a cost savings because that is the value that promo delivers. It's not a um it's not a bottom priced, it's not a discount solution. It's a cost saving solution for a company that's spending more today. So, could I have convinced someone who can only afford 2,500 a month for marketing that Promote is a good fit? Maybe, probably. But I know if they're thinking all I can afford to move my business forward is $2,500 a month, I know that they want leads today
Ex-
and that they will be a very volatile client. But I can afford to say no to those people or suggest other alternatives for them and only look for our ICP because I'm not incentivized to do anything else.
Yep, exactly.
And when you hire a salesperson, they get a commission on whatever they sell, even if they're not an ideal client.
Hmm.
So human behavior, a salesperson's mind, which is motivated by money, they want their commission. And if they're talking to someone who may be outside the ICP or the agency has said they only want to work with service companies and these guys are a manufacturer, if I know I get 10% of that deal, I'm probably going to sell it through because I have bills to pay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
No, it's interesting. Yeah, you and I I'll never like what is this? 3, 4 weeks ago, we were messaging and you just sent me a message. You're like, okay, I think here's a list of good fit, here's a list of bad fit. And it was just like it was the most intuitive, yes, this is exactly it. Like you are and and for that to be driven by economics, that's really what you want. That's a sweet spot. You want that driven by economics and driven by pricing. Those are levers that you can pull that attract people for whom they are a good fit. I mean, the last thing you want, like you said, the last thing you want if somebody is using, you really don't want your software to be a life raft. I've seen this a lot. I mean, this is really pernicious in niche small business software is you'll kind of end up where somebody like A company will get into a niche business. I mean, I always use coffee shops as an example, but like a really common thing is you go to a bunch of like coffee roaster trade shows, and then you just have, I mean, you basically are using Go High Level or some out of the box CRM, and you're just saying this is built for coffee shops. Well, you're then seen as this life raft for all of these businesses. And if your product does not fix their business entirely, then there's room for then a competitor to come in and say, well, we are the really good coffee CRM that will now business. And then that becomes a race to the is a really, really, really
Interesting.
bad place to be.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the same, but I had a client who was a software client, and his software was for construction companies to vet contractors. So general contractors to, I guess when they're doing bids, they have to do these lookups on many different licenses and insurance, bonding, safety records, like just all this different stuff. They have to include that picture in their bids along with all their contractor details, right? This software allowed a general contractor to look up all of this in one place versus spending like, I think it was like an hour that it would take to find it in lots of other places. But it was only for the state of California because the reality was the data that was being used is only public, like all of those data points are really only public in California. And so they had data feeds into the back end of this software delivering the data, but it was shrouded in so much secrecy. Like the owner had so much anxiety about people seeing his customer list or in any way knowing where he was getting his data because it's public data. Anybody could also get a data feed for that same data. And if they had his customer list, but I'm like, there's only like, I think it was 3 or 4,000 people in the state of California that are even candidates for this software. So it was a very small, total available market for a very niche software that was built with public data. Like it was just very flimsy as a business model. And I watched the anxiety it caused this business owner because he knows like this is, anybody could come grab this whole thing at any second, but he's wanting to grow it and market it. But at every turn, he's like, we can't do that because of it. Like we really couldn't even do anything at the end of the day because he was so paranoid. People
Yes.
getting his, yeah,
That's a tough place. I mean, that's a really tough place to be in. It's because it kind of I mean, yeah, stuff like that has all of the ingredients of a great company. Niche, really specific, memorable, solves a problem that people have in an elegant way. But there's also risk in that, like that there is, again, that's like one of the primary things that can kill a startup is just that there's a belief that you can kind of go down a lot of paths at once, and in early stages, absolutely, you can do that. But then there's some hard forks you need to make, and not being willing to make those hard forks is can be
yeah.
detrimental long term.
Well, we've had a couple of conversations with some pretty big fish, large enterprise companies, and have kind of, chatted about creating bigger, more robust enterprise custom solutions for companies like that. And I hope we do those kind of projects someday, like if we want to. It could be fun. There could be a lot of money in it. But in the short term, it's like we only have so much bandwidth. How much would that take us completely off track? If we're heads down in a project like that for 6 months, that's 6 months of ground lost in the open market. Yeah. So founder led sales are good. It's very hard, not easy. It's very, very hard. But guess what? That's what it is. It's very hard.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I know a guy, I feel bad. I know a guy who is trying to get an AI solution off the ground. He did not build it. He's white labeling something. It's very low cost. It seems cool. It's like well, I don't want to say what it is. It has a lot of very applicable uses in mid-market business. And the first thing he did was try to recruit contractor salespeople. Like he wanted a whole bunch of 1099 salespeople to be selling this as if it's their job. And I'm like, dude, how are they ever going to make it? Like the solution is like $50 a month per head, and one company might have 10 users. How's this person ever going to make any money?
It is one of those, like, all of those types of things are easily filtered through the lens of 90% failure rate. Like all of those things that feel like an easy way, of course, I'll just do this. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, just hop into Reddit real quick and just see how all of these folks, how are all of these founders doing emotionally? Are they putting in 80-hour weeks and barely hanging on and still operating at a 90% failure rate like this? You didn't find a hack. These things have been, and I'm not saying this person in particular, I'm saying just this
It's the mindset.
concept of, like, just the amount of times I've heard of, like, we'll launch this company, we'll pay for some ads, we'll run campaigns to 100,000 people. It's a numbers game. You don't think that every startup has had this thought before? If it were this, there would not be like, if this is how this is done, the failure
Yeah.
rate would not be 90%, you know?
Well, it makes sense to me just, and I don't have an MBA. I've never grown a software company to $100 million, yet, but it makes sense just on a really fundamental level. It's like when you make sourdough bread. You got to have the starter, and the starter takes time to become a starter. You have to feed it, you have to care for it, you have to, it's a fairly sensitive
You have to
process. It's like
fuck up a lot of loaves. You fuck up a
you
lot of
do.
loaves.
It's really like a long time ago somebody gave an explanation for, like, I don't know, it was like a life lesson. And I have Googled this. I can't find it anywhere. He might have made it up. He was talking about the law of the school and the law of the farm. And I've Googled this. I can't find any like writings on the law of the school, law of the farm. But the way he described it was like law of the school is um everything starts at a certain time and it's very organized and structured because it's a man-made process that really isn't rooted in anything organic, right? It's just this kind of like suspended man-made process that we plop into our lives. And so if I go to this class and if I get this grade, then I get this degree, and then this is my reward for this thing I just did. Right. But the law of the farm is very results based. It's not time based. It's okay. Yeah, you'll have your field ready to harvest in fall if you do this and you do it right, and you do this and you do it right, and you do this and it doesn't rain too much or too little. Like it's dependent on all these external forces of nature, right?
Yes.
As opposed to the law of the school and business. I'm going to say it. When you're an employee in a corporate setting, law of the school. When you're a
Yes.
salesperson in any setting, or if you're a business owner or a founder, law of the farm. Like, sure, we could be hiring people and getting an office space and getting our first investment dollars by the end of the year if this and this and this click and happen and go, if we do it right and read the room right. It's so interdependent on all these things. And if you don't have that mindset of law of the farm, like getting gritty with it, doing what it freaking takes to make a thing happen.
Dude, when I was doing business coaching and selling like business related products, the absolute worst clients that I had were physicians and MBAs. The absolute worst. To where it got to the point to where I was like working with like integrative medicine, functional medicine. So these are physicians that, maybe had a practice for a bit. They're part of a group and they want to go out on their own and do a cash-based practice. So this was big in like the mid 2010s. This was really taken off. And I was very excited about it personally. And so I kind of branch out into this arena, helping these physicians set up practices. And it got to the point to where in our first meeting, I would tell them, I go, "Was med school hard?" "Yes, of course, the hardest thing ever." I go, "Okay, cool. When you started that, you had a 78% chance of completing it successfully and walking out of there with the salary. Like the thing that you're doing now, your likelihood of success just reversed. You know what I mean? Like, so just, you need to approach this in a way that, like, if you don't have the mindset that this is going to be 4 to 5 times more difficult than med school, and your chances of failure are 4 to 5 times higher than when you started med school, this isn't for you. Like, this is not a thing that you think it is. But your point of just there's a rubric. Like, I mean, this is a group of people that were probably 4.0 from the time they were 4 old, and it is just always there's a rubric and then there are results. These things are predictable. Never been in a world where if you do everything right, you show up on time, you work harder than everybody else, you're still probably going to fail.
Mm,
This is a weird thing. It's a weird thing to hold in your head, especially for generally, if you're a physician, you're probably well adjusted emotionally somewhat. And so
yeah.
it's like it's just different. It's not the thing you think it is.
It's not. And it's yeah, I mean, I think it's beautiful in a weird way, like just like the law of the farm, you know? Like it does depend on some luck. It does, but it's, you know, the old saying, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And that's true. It's like, yeah, we've had some lucky moments of, oh, then this person actually ended up being a licensee. That's cool. But it's like, well, I was in every meeting I could be in. You know, I showed up as often as possible. And how many meetings have I had that nothing happened, you know? So those lucky strokes do happen. And I cannot imagine a successful founder that didn't have like some just really lucky moments where they just met the right person or got the right yes at the right time, or it almost all fell apart. And then at the last second, something big happens. All that stuff, you know, for sure happens. But the foundation of it all is just blood and sweat and tears and lots of hours of work.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna make a prediction, and I want to do it. I want there to be a record of this prediction. So like let's transition a little bit into AI world. This is my prediction. I've been thinking, like, is pro mode a person's first AI tool, or is it their second? That's oftentimes like a good gauge. Are you positioned as somebody's first attempt at AI adoption, or are you the solution? And this could be anything, right? Like, is this the first guitar I buy? Like, the first guitar you buy is very different from the second guitar you buy, right? So to me, I've always just had a hunch that Pro Mode is the second attempt at a departmental AI solution for people. I think it'll be well positioned there because then we have pain points of the solutions that Pro Mode provides, which are very self-evident. But then we also kind of need this. We really do need an AI pain point for people. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? We need to be like, okay, well, this using AI in this way sucks. Can we all agree? So I've always felt, and then because Pro Mode is sort of built around both of those things, right? And so I have this opinion that Pro Mode is really well positioned as a second attempt at a departmental AI solution once the market has developed some frustration about other things. And
Mm-hmm.
how I think that's going to happen is I think that legacy influencers, I guess, for lack of a better term, or legacy personality types who have, this is one thing that I'm seeing, people that have a massive like marketing newsletter, or they've had a 20-year blog that everybody in marketing goes to. But these people have distribution. And I think that they're kind of hopping on the AI hype train and will use their distribution to deploy like clunky tools, right? That to me is where I think Pro Mode finds its sweet spot, is like these legacy influencers are like convincing an entire industry that AI adoption is important, but because their attempt at an AI solution is basically, I mean, like, let's be honest, is basically you learned how to create a custom GPT and now you're launching a product to this audience that you have. That's kind of
Mm-hmm.
most people's reference point for the tools that are being built today. To me, I see that as Pro Mode's inroad, is
Mm-hmm.
people like buy a legacy style tool wrapped up in a custom GPT from legacy voices in legacy industries, make the full throated attempt at AI adoption, and then see some benefit, but then they actually know the things that that tool doesn't have, or doesn't do, or can't do long term, or can't scale with. So
Mm.
my prediction is that that's where we find our product market fit is on the heels of kind of legacy voices and sort of incomplete tooling.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think by and large, damn near every prospect I've talked to has at least used ChatGPT. Probably a couple that have not, but yeah, by and large, they've all at least used some tools, and they have a discerning eye, and they have a high standard for their company. They are not dazzled by the outputs of ChatGPT. They see the inadequacies just in the copy. They know perception of the AI tools available, the chat interfaces. Their perception is this is not for business, you know?
Yeah.
Like they've tried to use it here and there, but they're like, I don't feel confident in this as a business tool for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think I'm excited, just peek under the hood a little bit with what we've got going on the dev side of Pro Mode. Yesterday we had a marathon day. It was awesome. But one critical thing that I'm realizing is an impediment for us communicating our value proposition is that I honestly, like, I really don't know I don't know how to display a fingerprint profile to somebody. Like, how can you show them that there is this like database that is this evergreen, persistent, learning, evolving thing that's powering all of this underneath? I mean, I don't know what to do. Is like, do I just show you a bunch of Python running machine learning on this? Like, it just is never a thing that I've seen done before. And
Yeah.
so we've been wrestling with like, okay, well, we talk about this core differentiator is just big data and using data, bringing a level of like data driven insights to marketing in a way it's like McKinsey level data analytics and the ability to test things. But it's kind of weird because it's like, well, we can't show you. There's like nothing you can click on this. This is just code that's running.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just had a marathon day yesterday going through and looking at different UIs and like, do we make it drag and drop? How do we like separate all of the sections of this database? Should we give people the ability to like type something in there, move a button, drag a box here, move this there? And we arrived at like a very, very exciting way to reveal some of these things that are going on underneath the hood that I think will really help us kind of communicate that differentiator better. That has been again, I think we look at most of the AI tools that are coming out today are some sort of approximation of a chat interface because that is everybody's reference point. Like the first time they saw AI, it was in Chat GPT. So then that is just the UI that people are replicating, not really understanding that there's a lot more that you can do before that generative AI layer, which is our core value proposition, is like the moment that something is coming out of generative AI, most of the work should have been done prior to that and
Mm-hmm.
probably not dependent upon the user's ability to prompt. I think that is a mistake to build things in that way. But it's also like I've never seen anybody reveal machine learning in a user interface. How do you do that? So anyway,
Yeah.
I am very excited for these next few weeks where we're actually going to start like putting out some prototypes of how we're going to reveal what's going on underneath the hood in a way that's tangible, can be clicked, can be touched, modified, things like that. So,
That's very cool. I just had a conversation about the fingerprint profile yesterday with one of our licensees, and I am really curious. Like, I might even have you go back and watch that part of the call because we recorded it. Here's how I described it. Tell me if I'm wrong. I don't mind if I'm, because if anyone's listening, it's a really complex concept that took me months to understand. And I don't even know if I fully understand it. But so so it started with her showing me, and she's lovely. Like she's like so cute. I feel like I could say that. She was showing me some custom GPTs she had that she was really pleased with. And one of them was these two books that we've both heard of that are like branding and storytelling and that kind of thing, helps with positioning and messaging. So she uploaded both of those books, the entire PDF of both books. So I don't know how many characters that is or words, but it's a lot. Uploaded those to make a custom GPT that she could then interact with to get client strategy, positioning, kind of inspiration from. And she did pro mode. And she was like, tell me something about pro mode. It's very cute. Like she wanted me to
Mm.
feed her GPT so it could spit out some cool stuff. And it did. You know, it was similar to some of the stuff I've done on Chat GPT for us in the outputs. And she got a kick out of it because she's like, this actually looks a lot like what you guys are doing. Like kind of be bold and provocative and, you
Mhm.
know, be the like outwardly disruptive solution to make waves and that kind of thing. And then I said, well, you know that you're using ChatGPT for a mini. There's a context window in play. What's a context window? And so I Google it with her. I'm like, look, I mean, it's like 8,000 tokens is the context window for that AI model. Well, what's a context window? Well, it's the size of the window that the AI is looking through at the content that you've just given it. The
Good. That's
size,
really good.
yeah, so the size of that window is much smaller than the amount of content you've just uploaded into it, which means it's not considering everything you just gave it. And she was like, what? I had no idea. No idea. So there's this fundamental, like we've talked about context windows a lot. I see it on LinkedIn from time to time, but probably just because it's our space that we live in. But there's not a lot of understanding about that principle that ChatGPT is not reading everything you're giving it.
Yeah.
It's
It's
forgetting most of what you're telling it.
That's so funny that you say that. V1, this is before I met you, but like what was to become Promo One was it was like a group of marketing consultants, and they were actually specific consultants. And it was like, there was like Seth Godin, there was Building a Story Brand, Donald Miller, and I had calculated these context windows for it. And so like a lot of these models are claiming billion parameters. So I was like, okay, well, billion parameter models, I'll be able to, I could, at one point, I think I put like 3 Seth Godin books into this thing. And then I started to test it and and like had the books here with me. And I'm like, okay, let's like find a chapter in one of these books. I'm going to reference it in this tool and like let's just like see if we can come up with a marketing strategy from this thing. And I was immediately like, this needs something else. There needs to be something else underneath of this. It is not, it is like, it could trick you. Like it could trick you into thinking it is using that book or using some reference material, but it most certainly was not. That was, and so like it's funny you say that because that exact thing that you're describing was the impetus for Fingerprint profile, is like
Yeah.
very intentional abstraction of the data inside of that book and then retrieval of the specific chapter. Those are like
Yeah.
3 to 4 steps that occur to get the thing that you're describing.
Right. So she's like, well, how do I like, what am I supposed to do? You know, she's realizing this limitation for the first time, even though she's a pro mode user. I guess we didn't dive into that aspect a whole lot. I mean, she was so excited about the workflow improvements and what it would mean for her business to not have to hire as many people that, you know, it wasn't a huge selling point to her. But in this conversation, she's seeing this is a huge limitation, these context windows. Like, how do you solve for that with pro mode? And I said, well, you don't prompt pro mode. She's like, yeah, that's true. You don't prompt it. Okay. So we're not interacting with the LLM through a prompt. It's an API. It's an encrypted API call. So we're asking much better questions. And then I said, we're also not just throwing a whole bunch of information at the LLM. That's why you have a fingerprint profile and a structured AI database, because it's all about how your data is structured to interact with the LLM. And She's like, well, what's the difference between the fingerprint profile and the AI database? And I said, the fingerprint profile, correct me, this is the part where I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. The fingerprint profile is essentially a map to the database. So it's the glossary, it's the, if you want to find this, go over here. If you want to find this, go over here. It's like your map to
Mhm.
to that database. And she's like, I see. So the faster the AI, the LLM can find that ultimate source data in your database, the less cost to us, the faster the outputs to the user. And because it's so structured and organized, super accurate, super on brand, very low hallucination possibility. Am I right?
Spot on. Yeah. And I really liked your context window visual was great. Like I what I envision is like you're looking through this thing. So although there's all of these things over here, the context window that you're looking through is only giving you access to the things you can see through that window. Now, so you might say, okay, I've got this context. This is funny. I've got this context window. Maybe I just blow it up. What you don't realize is the more you blow this up, the more you're getting a crossover of just some
Yeah.
trashy shit. And so what the what the fingerprint profile does is so like you've got this limited context window without hallucinations. It basically just gives you like 40 of these things, and it's actually a much smaller targeted context window. And you are retrieving like, I mean, I think we can retrieve up to like 15 of these hyper focused context windows as it looks into this database. Instead of expanding one, you end up getting hallucination when you do that. You end up getting more vanilla output, more just like dissatisfaction, right? But then if all of a sudden you can actually shrink the original context window and multiply it by 10, now all of a sudden you're like shooting laser beams directly into these databases.
Okay. I think I am so excited for the day when this is a really cool animation. Because it
We could probably
totally
make
can
one.
be. I mean, when I imagine it, I've never taken acid, but when I imagine what you're saying, I'm like, I bet this is what it feels like to be on acid
Acid will multiply your context windows.
mode, like dropping acid for your marketing.
All right, let's
Not the
let's
message for
keep talking.
engineering firms, I would guess.
Mhm. Yeah. All right, let's talk about more AI. You've probably seen this making
Mm-mm.
its way across the internet. The study's been making the rounds. First off, it's not gone to peer review. This is a paper draft, but all the dorks and AI doomers have been freaking out about this. Basically, what it is they have three groups of people. It was like 50 something participants. One group was using ChatGPT to help them write an essay. One group was using Google, and one group was using nothing to write this essay. So they were just using their own cognitive function, unaided whatsoever. What they found was not surprising. The group using a large language model showed a decline in working memory. So what they did is they wrote an essay. After the fact, they were asked a series of questions, given brain scans as they were asked those questions, and they showed that the person using the LLM had a decreased working memory, and they call it cognitive debt, as they were using this essay to write or as they were using ChatGPT to write the essay. So, not a super surprising finding. I mean, I think people's reaction to it was like way overblown. It would be akin to saying using a calculator while doing your accounting means that you don't remember the numbers that you were computing as well. I mean, it is kind of a similar thing that you would say, where like working memory decreased during this time. So obviously, it's not gone to peer review. It's not a long-term study, but it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know that this is as bad as people are thinking it is. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to look for some other papers just to have a side by side comparison of other types of AI, how other types of AI and other tasks affect our brain. So in these brain scans, it was just simply like working memory was the thing that was affected by it. And so I started looking around and I started looking for some other papers, and I found this paper. So this is actually out of China. And what they found here was they showed they had three groups of people in this study also. It was about a 4 times larger sample size. What they did is that they showed videos. So the three groups, one group saw a personalized video that was served by a recommender system. So this is like the algorithm. You see more shit that you want to see, more things that you like. The second group was shown a generalized random video of the same length of time. The third group was shown a blank black screen. And then they did so immediately after going through this, they went through a series of videos, and they found that similarly, the group that was served a short form video content that was a part of a recommender system all showed effects on the frontal lobe portion of the brain. So these brain scans revealed that being served up recommender system videos, uh, it lowered impulse control, it decreased like social interaction anticipation. So basically, like increased anxiety around social interactions. But the vast majority of the effects were all related to like poor executive function in the brain. So, like, maybe said plainly, in both of these instances, and this study was actually, by the way, this study was one of the pivotal reasons that the CCP mandated a change to the TikTok algorithm. So, as most people know, the recommender system is not based purely on your past behavior in the Chinese algorithm of TikTok. In fact, there's more educational content, there's more like somebody else is controlling the recommender system a lot more in that instance, which, you know, we can debate that as far as like a political government control thing, whatever. But I found it really fascinating. So that these are two studies that are talking about the effects of AI on the brain, and both of them involve functional MRI scans. But in the machine learning recommender system, the algorithm, as far as what effects it had on the brain, substantially more detrimental effects that would like affect a person's well-being, their relationships, their feeling of self, their impulse control, their addictive behavior. These are the areas of the brain that were affected by this type of AI. So I
Hmm.
always find the AI doomer talk to be so like so siloed to generative AI. And it's like, well, you guys have really been on the receiving end of much more deleterious effects of AI for years. A, you didn't know it, and B, if you wanted to know it, you could, but uh it seems like your brain has turned to mush already. And so maybe this type of AI has its hooks in you so much that
Hmm.
like you're looking for like, yes, AI is a villain in a lot of situations, but like you're kind of picking the wrong villain, because one of these villains is giving you candy every day. And the other one is just like, oh, I can't remember
Yeah.
that essay that I wrote 20 minutes ago as
Interesting.
well as somebody who didn't
Yeah,
use
it's
an
like, is it
LLM.
more
You know what I mean? It's like
detrimental to be an
it,
operator of AI or a
it is
consumer of
it's like
AI?
hypocrisy at the highest
But it's
order, in
so
my opinion.
detrimental to be a consumer when it comes to the recommender systems in algorithms and TikTok and whatnot, because you don't even know you're being a consumer of AI.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like, boy, I'll tell you what, like if we look at generative AI and it feels powerful, you know, it's almost like too complex, in my opinion. Like the technology is kind of too complex to become so powerful that we lose control or awareness of it. But boys, things like neural networks and machine learning, now all of a sudden we've got endless chips and data centers. It's almost like this thing, almost like the simpler the technology is and the greater scale on which it runs, just that to me feels very dangerous. Like if we're concerned about AI, we should probably be looking at these more legacy AI systems.
What is the function of the, why do you have to write an essay? Are you coming from the law of the school or the law of the farm in why you're writing the essay? Are you writing an essay because you were assigned an essay to write and you really don't give it the essay that you're writing? You just have to check a box? Or are you writing an essay to perform a function? Like, I need a convincing argument for this because doing so has consequences on my life beyond just a grade.
Yes. Or even as a parent, do you want your kid graduating high school and going out in the world remembering the finer points of the essays that they've written or with like their dopamine and impulse control intact? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like if you're going to like choose a boogeyman, to me, there's like, yeah, there's just other obvious places to look, in my opinion. You know, like I didn't use Google for
Mm-hmm.
any of the essays that I wrote in high school because it didn't exist. I still can barely remember anything.
So, Mark Benioff, CEO of Salesforce, has been sort of a, I don't know, what's the word? Somebody you look up to. Like, he's been kind of a beacon on my path anyway for pro mode because when I started looking into retrieval augmented
Uh-huh.
generation, RAG model after meeting you, when I would search for, okay, is anyone else doing this? What's happening? Mark Benioff was by far the most vocal about that particular AI process, and he was all in on it. I mean, lots of interviews. You can find them on YouTube of, where they're allocating resources as a company for the last year plus. Like, he really thinks it is the future of sales. It's the future of work. It is the headcount replacement uh, sort of inflection point, I guess, that, would say things like he wants 1 billion agents in the world. Like, he wants to see a billion. He's also said that they're not hiring any more developers. I think last year he announced that. And I think he was so vocal about it. Obviously they're a publicly traded company, so they're trying to massage their numbers there. And then yesterday they announced the layoff of 1,000 employees because of AI.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is it's one of those things you like, okay, what makes a tool like a CRM and Salesforce great is that like the tool itself tells the human what to do, not the other way around. So like this is traditional software database is that Heather, you go in to enter a new deal into Salesforce and you put the prospect name, their company name, their email. So you're putting all of these things in. So the tool is telling you what to do, right? When you flip that script and then all of a sudden you as the user, you are telling the tool what to do, the way that you organize that data inside of that application has to change fundamentally. You're like really turning the subject object
Mm.
of software around. And this is like the key difference between using AI and prompting and all of this is that you're just like flipping the script and you're saying, okay, now the user is telling the software how to act. This is a foundational difference. And I think the clunky rollout of Agentforce is proof that you've got an underlying infrastructure where the software is
Mm-hmm.
telling the users what to do, and you're trying to slap something on without changing anything under the hood, you are flipping the script where now the user is telling the software what to do. And I just don't think that, in the same way last time we recorded, we talked about Google taking the
Yeah.
big swing, leaving billions of dollars on the table by moving everything to AI overview. We'll figure out how to make money later. Right now, we need to burn the boats. Well, we can figure out how to make money, but we cannot have one foot in each camp. We've got to go all in on this. And I think truthfully, for something like Agentforce to actually be functional and usable, you have got to till the soil.
Yeah. So they let 1,000 people go, or I saw the announcement yesterday. They say it's because of AI, that they're dependent more and more on AI and less on human headcount. Who knows if that's actually true? Like, they could have fired all those people because Agentforce hasn't been adopted and sold as much as they thought, and they were overstaffed. And they could spin the message that, hey, it's because AI is working that we're laying off all these people. Like, that could be a shareholder misdirect. I don't know. Who knows? But you're talking about how the Salesforce Agentforce adoption was not what they expected. It hasn't been what they expected. And in a way, that's comforting to me because, part of me kind of expected Promo to catch fire far more than it has by now, and that people would just get it and grab hold of it. But seeing that user resistance, data quality issues, lack of understanding about its AI capabilities, and insufficient executive buy-in are the top reasons Agentforce hasn't launched to the extent that they thought it would, which are also the same reasons Promode isn't where we, ideally would like. It's just that more education is needed, more training of users, and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
philosophical framework.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I read reports on like inaccuracies upwards of like 40 to 50% on this thing. To me, that's also promising with our pro mode architecture thesis that like data abstraction is key. A tool like Salesforce is like fundamentally a tool like Salesforce is designed for 100% accuracy. So like it will provide 100% accurate results for every field that you have completed in that CRM to workflows where 95, 96% accuracy is a massive leap ahead, right? So like in our case, like with marketing, there's been no way to achieve even close to like 100% data driven marketing, and that would be impossible. It's such a subjective world, but like to be able to go from like maybe today in an agency, really like science driven, data driven agencies are
Yeah. The
maybe
ad
10% of
targeting.
marketing activities are
Yeah.
very hard data driven. We're looking at the analytics. That's probably an e-commerce, very high level e-commerce, maybe 10% of marketing activities are like that. So there's just all of these industries where I think if you're building AI in them, you should be looking for places where like, okay, 10% of marketing today for very high end e-commerce is data driven. Okay, now what if we could bring in the other 90% of marketing activities could have like a 96% accurate data lift? This is where AI does phenomenally because you can create these data abstractions. LLMs can use the data. It's very modular, but to deliver 96% accuracy for Agentforce, you would need to just clear the deck of the entire architecture of the entire application, and you would need to start thinking about your data
Yeah.
in chunks instead of fields. And that's a bold move. You're essentially sunsetting all of your enterprise clients. You're having to stand up a second product. And that's as a publicly traded company is just like they are at the peak. I mean, they are at the peak of software, and this is just a natural sales cycle where you either commit seppuku or the market does it for you.
It, it's changing daily. Like if you're a company that has 50,000 people in your CRM, like if you're a sizable company, actually, even if you're a mid-market company, you could have 50,000 people in your CRM. What are the chances that one of their email addresses changed today? There's a very high chance, or changed in the last month, or somebody changed their, place of work, or they're no longer in that role. They're still at the company, but they're not the point of contact anymore for this thing. Like it's a dynamic thing on the data side, and the inputs are super dynamic because you've got every salesperson interacting in that CRM with various levels of adoption. It's rare I mean, let's just say it never happens that you have 100% CRM adoption in a sales team. So the the point where the Agentforce is coming in, applying AI agents to the CRM, the data is not accurate from the jump. The inputs aren't accurate from your sales team, or they're not, you know, at protocol. So yeah, it's the garbage in, garbage out data formula at play.
Mhm. Exactly. Exactly. And it would be like it would be, there would be, to do it properly, Salesforce would have to chunk their data by industry, by deal stage, by head count, and that has to all be dynamic. And to your point, there has to be a real-time enrichment step before you take any action, all of that. So you would chunk out, let's say you're a company, you sell into manufacturing. Your whole CRM would have to be, all right, chunk out all of my manufacturing leads, headcount this size, region of the country this size, boom, data enrichment step. Now let's a separate step where an agent is cleaning up that data on a per record basis. These things are not cheap. These API calls, this compute power to really execute on it is very expensive to do. It just is to again, you could do it from the ground up. I mean, you could build this, you could build Agentforce for like a small company that's maybe got 5,000 people in a specific industry in their CRM. You could really clean up the enrichment workflows, pull from an
Mm-hmm.
industry specific database. But to do this entire global AI native CRM is just the compute cost is just way too expensive to do it properly today. And so just you've got to make one decision, on that front. And I just don't think that having agents crawl this legacy database that is going to be all over the map without like chunking ability, like enriching chunks without it's too much. It's too much. It's not surprising that adoption was low and accuracy was low. Could have seen that coming a mile away.
It can't be an equal trade-off. Self-driving cars are just as safe as human driving cars. It's like, well, I need better than that. I need a much higher level of certainty that this self-driving car is not going to self-drive us off a cliff. And I think the overall vibe of AI is similar, that every tool, especially if it's expensive, has to be way more accurate, way better, way more reliable than the human alternative. Because I'm thinking of the human alternative, what, 30, 40, 50% accuracy. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. Like, I'm thinking of places I've sourced data from, and data tools that exist that we've all heard of and have all used. Those lists are not pristine either, so my tolerance for inaccuracy is based on that, not based on 100% being achievable, because it's not.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, you nailed it. You nailed it. So yeah, a massive improvement in how CRMs are run using AI is possible. It just is. If it's kind of one of those things, like if you've ever built a CRM before and you want to build the AI powered CRM, I
Yeah.
think you should just like men in black yourself with how you're thinking about it.
With ProMode, we're building a net new marketing database. an AI database. We're compiling it, we're structuring it in a very specific way using their website content, using off-page content that's, sales materials, whatever. Like we're saying, throw us everything you have, and then we structure it in a way that we know ProMode can deliver an output that's satisfactory to the user. We're not having to, override an existing system.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. If we were to try to build, I mean, there is a reason why the first thing that we ingest into this fingerprint profile is not spreadsheets of analytics. Like that is an afterthought. And this is through a lot of iteration. I tried that. I tried that. There's a reason that we create the entire filing system from the website because the website is the most human approximation of how this business thinks about the shit that they sell. And then we can take the analytics and we know what folder for it to go in. But the abstraction step is one that is so important to get right from just a really holistic first principles perspective. And for us, after like testing a bunch of different things, like I tried it with your entire LinkedIn history. I'm like, oh yeah, this would be the best way to set up a database. These are spreadsheets. These are hard numbers. And I'm like, this sucks.
Mm-hmm.
This is really bad. But if like I took heathergertis.com. I know that you put the most amount of thought into how that is organized. That is a representation of you and how you think about your brand. And then if I take your LinkedIn, really structured CSVs, performance analytics, and I dumped it into there, now all of a sudden we have valuable insights. And this is, I mean, when you're building software and you're structuring the database underneath your software, this is like it is upside down. You're like building this thing upside down. But after so much testing and so much iteration, it is like now to me starting to feel like I see the CRM. I'm like, okay, this is how I would build the CRM. Is if I'm going to have the user telling the software what to do, it
Mm-hmm.
has to be built
Interesting.
around that, how that user thinks about their job, thinks about their business, thinks about themselves. And then all of the hard analytics can go into that, but it has to be set up for that user's purpose. Shall we call it before we get cut off again?
The title of this episode:
Rabbit trails and chem holes.
K-holes and chemtrail
Yeah,
will show up on another algorithm.
it is actually. What did you say it was? Rabbit holes and K-hole.
Fun. Well, this episode of Tenfold AI, sponsored by ProMode.ai, has been really fun. I'm Heather. That's Matt.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see you next time.